You're listening to Blaxit Radio with on-air personalities in Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, and Tanzania. Playing smooth jazz, quiet storm, R&B, reggae, and the very best talk, 24/7.
Further ado, welcome Amira and Chanko to the show. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
thank you
Thank
for
you for
having
having
us.
us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really excited to have this interview with you guys and share your story and what you're doing with other people, because I think you're doing some exciting things here in Costa Rica. So to get started, maybe you could just take a few minutes and introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us where you're from, a little bit about your background, just whatever you want us to know.
You can.
Sure. So I am Amira. I call myself the energy guide. A little bit about my background. My family is from the Dominican Republic. I was born in New York, was raised in New York City all my life. I have a background in sociology and international relations, and I do energy work now. Um, so I did all the studying to realize that as human beings, we're much more complex than our behaviors and our psychology. There's so much more to us, and that's why I do what I do now, is combining all the things that I learned in school, and then also understanding that we're energetic spiritual beings, and the way to receive optimal health is by understanding all parts of us and not just one part of us.
Okay. All right. So, Chanko.
So my name is Chanko. I was born and raised in the Dominican Republic until I was 11. Then in 2002, we moved to New York with my family, and I lived there until 2019, 2020. And then moved out to Delaware and then Costa Rica. And in my background, I'm an artist. I'm a digital illustrator. I first became a graphic designer and then discovered that my love is more for illustration, storytelling. And that's what I've been doing for like about 6 years now. And then once I got to Costa Rica, I decided to open up my world more into like movement and physical things. So I do capoeira, I teach kids and adults, and then discovering parkour here in the mountains and playing with the rocks and climbing things, and then also teaching kids how to do that up here in Costa Rica.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, since you're from the Dominican Republic, have you lived in any other countries, or have you visited any other countries before moving to Costa Rica?
Yes. So I've studied in Spain. I did a semester in Spain, and I did a summer in Ecuador. And then while we were dating, we've been to a lot of different countries like Puerto Rico, Cuba, Jamaica,
Egypt, Ethiopia.
Yeah, and then we expanded our horizons and went across the ocean. So we visited a lot of places, and I think our idea was to like just learn different cultures and ways of living. But I think ultimately we were looking for a place we would call home.
Yeah, we even at one point thought about Atlanta, calling Atlanta home, and also visited Arizona to see how it felt. And in the States, I feel like we didn't travel as much internally, and I think we went to San Diego, Arizona, and Atlanta, and then went down the East Coast, trying to feel what it felt like to move around. And they gave us like a little bit of confidence to like we can move and we can do this and start over and somewhere else.
Right. Well, what made you decide to move to Costa Rica?
Yeah, so we came to Costa Rica for our honeymoon.
In 2015.
Yeah, that was 7 years ago. And immediately we came to the Caribbean side, and when we were there, and we saw a lot of expats living there. I was like, oh wow, we can live here. Like I feel like for a lot of us, like moving to another place and living somewhere else hasn't really always been a thing. So when we saw expats living here, we're like, oh, like you can live somewhere else. So I'm like, okay, well, I would love to retire here. That's the idea that one day we would retire here. But when I got pregnant, and it was after during the pandemic, I got pregnant and I just said, sorry.
So you moved here during the pandemic?
Right at like as it was finishing in 2021.
I mean, it's now finishing. So
yeah,
it's
like in July of 2021.
Yeah, July 2021.
Well, now when you did decide to move, what was your exit strategy? What did you do when you decided that you were going to move? How did you go about planning the whole thing? Because how long did it take you to decide that you were actually going to move here? Like in preparation for moving here, was it like a fast thing that you did, or you said, okay, 6 months from now, we're just going to pack up all our stuff?
Well, we were already, like January 2021, we were already kind of like in a space of like, we weren't living in the same place we were living, which was in Delaware. So we needed to find a new place to call home. So we had initially already packed up all our stuff and
sold a lot of the stuff.
And we were just kind of like feeling through what state felt like home. And like I was already pregnant and I'm like, none of it feels good to me. So I think April, I was like, I think we need to go to Costa Rica. And the reason why it seemed like a reality is because I knew a lot of people were moving here from like social media. And I knew one lady in particular who had her baby here. So I was in communication with her about what her process was having her baby here.
Yeah, no, and again, the road trip, when we started the road trip in like March, February, around there, we had packed all our stuff that we were gonna take with us, and it became a habit to pack and unpack. We hit Virginia, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then end up in Florida. And then on the way back, we also made some stop in South Carolina and in another, I think it was Virginia also, and feeling what it felt like to live away from home. So in that mindset, we left New York to come to Costa Rica with 7 suitcases, a little bit too much to carry by hand, but it sort of made it possible. I learned to pack quick and early. I learned to pack and unpack, so it became a habit to like, I don't have to think too much. I just know where everything goes. This suitcase for that. So it created a confidence that we can do this. And because the internet, our work mostly being virtual, it allowed us to say like, hey, I think we can do this overseas.
Well, so now what did your friends and family think though when you decided to move to Costa Rica?
So once again, I was pregnant and I was probably like 5 months when I told them. So I think we decided in April, and I'm like, we won't tell them until like right before we're planning to leave. So I was like, we'll give them a little bit more time. So in May, we told them, we're like, in July, we're leaving. It would be like 7 months when we were leaving. And they're like, are you guys crazy? Why are you going over there? The world is falling apart. You don't have any family over there. But I knew in my heart, I knew all those things could kind of like be taken care of. But like what felt best was like that peace that I know I would feel being here and having a baby here.
Right. Well, those sound like kind of like the standard objections or the standard answers that people get when they say they're going to move, especially when they say they're going to move to Costa Rica. When you got here, what community, because you mentioned the Caribbean coast, what community did you decide on? Did you go to the Caribbean coast when you first got here?
No, so we arrived in Escazú, and that was like the first place we called home for about 2-3 months. And then Amira was looking for a midwife, and the people who she met at that time, she wasn't very convinced that these are the right fit for her. So we ended up reaching out to a friend of hers who recommended another lady in Guanacaste. So I was like, again, we're moving. We just arrived to Costa Rica. We did this road trip. I thought we were gonna like finalize it here. It was a beautiful place with like in the middle of Escazú, like a little oasis with a pool and a beautiful greenery. And now Amira says again, like, oh, we're moving to Guanacaste.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, I think initially when we arrived, we were just mainly focused on landing because we had gone through so much movement and just like changes
Right.
getting to this point. So you guys were the first ones we actually really met
Met.
and really felt connected to.
Oh,
We're like, oh yeah,
cool.
Levinson and Devin feel like family, like feel like people we can connect with, and just helped us feel a little bit more grounded. But
Right.
like, you know, the baby was like, okay, I need to come out in a good environment. And Escazú was beautiful for us landing because they had all the comforts of like being able to order food and
Right.
different because you're vegetarian. But it also didn't feel like home.
It
So
was city.
it was a city. So we're like, okay, let's go where we need to go to have the baby. We ended up in Guanacaste. And once we had the baby there, we're like, okay, it's really hot here. I don't think we could do this anymore. Let's find somewhere else. So that's how we ended up in the mountains here in the southern zone.
Oh,
Yeah, and it was
cool. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, and it was like a funny story of how we ended up here because it wasn't planned. It was just like super improvised. We're supposed to go see like some carnival mask at the end of the year, which they have a festival. And we came with that thought and it never made it to the festival, but stayed here for a whole year, finding like a whole new world.
Wow. Wow. So, well, tell us a little bit about the community then that you finally chose. I'm assuming it feels like home now to you, right?
Yes. So here it was interesting because there's a huge expat community here, but it's like a mixture of Canadians, Americans, and even some Europeans, and then obviously in the mix of a lot of the ticos. But what
Ticos are
the ticos are the local people, and but what really made us really stay here, and once again we felt connected in a sense of family, was our two Caribbean friends that we met here. So the only two other brown people we saw here in the mountain, one is from Guyana, and the other one is from Saint Bartholomew. And once we saw them, we're like, wait, there's other brown people here, and like Caribbean too. Like it's not just like, you know, brown people, but yeah, we felt really at home with them because they were very helpful and very like, oh, if you ever need anything, let us know. There's like a much more bigger community here, because all we really saw, this was still kind of like in the middle of the pandemic, all we really saw was just like, you know, the visitors, the tourists kind of like coming to like these local spots when they were opening up. Yeah. So we didn't really feel like we were connecting with anybody in that way, but they told us it existed and that we can build it. So we're like, okay, let's stay here a little longer, because we had initially just booked the Airbnb for like 3 months, and we were going to decide what to do afterwards.
Well, now then tell us a little bit about the community that you're living in, because you said it's in the mountains. So up in the mountains where there's nothing, or like, are you close to town? How do you get, you know, like, are there services there? Tell us a little bit, because a lot of times people end up moving to the, you know, to expat locations when they get to Costa Rica. And there's a few of them that are kind of scattered around. And then sometimes people go off the beaten path and they find, you know, they're happy someplace else. So tell us a little bit about the area where you're living.
So this is the thing, right? When we say mountain, people assume like, oh, everything is like far, disconnected.
We're saying mountains, right?
Mountains, yes. So when we told our parents that, like, they were like, oh my God, they're like disconnected in the countryside. But, and this is again, like what allowed us to stay here, is that there is an ecosystem. There's Wi-Fi, there is like running water, hot water.
No, not running water.
Yeah, because that's the thing too. Some people come here and they want to live the, what is that experience? The
off-grid
experience. People say like, oh yeah, I'm living off grid, but you have Wi-Fi, you have water, you have a shelter, and yes, we have all of that. And the mountain where we live, it's like 30 minutes away from the main city. So in case you need something like you need to go to a pharmacy or you need to go to a supermarket, there are some small local supermarkets, mini markets. And then they have like the big markets, and each community, like the one up here, we have on Wednesdays, actually today, we just came from the local market where like locals come and bring their own produces and vending, and like they sell food, and usually a lot of people go there and we mingle, right? So we buy our food and we eat together. So that's a time to call like community, right? We're all communing, and it's a beautiful organic way of living that like we're sitting here talking to two people, and then there's two people over there, and they join in on our conversation. Because as we go, we have developed our connections, and we've developed our relationships, and we've met these people. Maybe today we sit with these two people, and then next week we'll sit with two other people, and then little by little we know pretty much the whole mountain.
Yeah, so just to kind of elaborate on the question or the answer, there's up the mountain, there's like this community hub of a cafe where they do open mics, they do talks, they do like workshops and stuff like that. Then there's another space where a lot of families gather that has like a playground and has a butterfly dome and a cafe. They sometimes do live music. They also do classes, workshops, events. So
we teach classes.
Yeah, so we also end up teaching. So there's little hubs in this mountain that do provide different events and gatherings for people that are looking for that. And you start to like realize too, like wherever you are, that like connecting with the local people, you'll start to see how many people live in different worlds.
Yeah, there's a main road and then a bunch of side street, and each side street is like a whole community. And it happens a lot.
Yeah, like it's a lot bigger than just like one road. It's like so many different worlds.
We've been riding this one road for like a year or so, or 2 years almost. And then yesterday, for the first time, we made a left in one place, and it's like another town.
Wow.
So we're still discovering.
What's the transportation like though to get around there? Because it seems like it's kind of spread out. Are there buses, or does everybody have to have their own car, or what? Uber?
There is no Uber.
No Uber.
You're lucky if you can get an Uber to come up here. There is a bus, and I believe the bus schedule is like 4 times a day or something. Like it's very sporadic. Like
4 times down, 4 times up.
Yeah, but it's a very comfortable bus. For like a mountain bus, is like a Mercedes, like cushion coach feeling bus.
And it's on time.
Yeah, it's a really, really good bus. And then if you're trying to like get off the path, then it's like either you're walking, or you just have to connect with someone locally to maybe get a motorcycle taxi or
and then we also have chats that we do, like ride shares, and like someone is going down to the center tomorrow, they'll write, hey, is anybody riding down? I'm here, can you pick me up on the road? So that web is also developed where like even if you don't have a car and you're driving up, you might ask for a lift, hitchhike, and that's still a thing up here. Like people are hitchhiking a lot. On the way down, if you see somebody, like you can honk at them and ask them if they need a ride. Sometimes they'll say yes. Sometimes they love walking, because that's another thing. Like develop a love for walking here because it's so beautiful to look.
Wow, that's really interesting. So then let's talk a little bit about housing then. Are you renting? Are you buying? Do you live? Is there like a lot of land? Do you have like neighbors close by? What's the housing situation where you're living?
So the housing, we're renting, and here you can experience so many different housing experiences.
Have you only lived in one house since you've been?
No, we've lived like in 6 houses.
So the whole moving thing hasn't stopped, right?
Yeah.
So we got here like a year and a half ago, and we've moved 6 times. And you feel like you're moving again?
Well, I think that's also part of the culture here, like as an expat, is that you come with this idea of like, okay, this is what I'm renting, and then you start to get acclimated to what the culture is like here, and they're like, oh wait, I have options. So when we first got here, we came to this very old house, because that's what we found on Airbnb, and we thought that it was normal, like this old little wooden house. And then like we'd have like a local guy come visit, and he's like, wow, you guys live in an old house. And we're like, wait,
he's like, he's saying that it's old, so that means it's not normal. We had it.
So then we got like, we opened up our minds and our expectations, and then we started to like, want more and experience a better housing. There is a lot of land. There's a lot of people building here. It's a super, super attractive land. Like the prices have gone super high up.
Within 5 years, it's increased like 300%.
And people are just buying land. It's not like they're buying much on the land. People are just much more interested in having a source of water. A lot of people come here for the river and just for solitude. The people want the highest peak and like away from the main road. Yeah, so it's very common, but our interest right now is just to really feel acclimated to the land and just be comfortable where we are.
And where we are now, like this is our sixth move, like you said, and it's in the same neighborhood as our last two places, but it's its own thing. It's like all we have as a neighbor is the cows.
Yeah, we have cows
and like
as
it's a
neighbors.
lot of greenery and next to the river. So it's I feel like we're really fortunate now, and we feel very lucky to be in this house, and our landlord is amazing.
Yeah, it's a new build too. So he was just building this house when we saw and heard about it. So we're living in a newly built house.
And he just built this office like 3 weeks ago.
What you were saying before is kind of a good example of when people are moving to Costa Rica, and I try to tell them to go around to different places and experience different locations, because you just really never know. People come and they're so enthusiastic about the fact that they are in Costa Rica and they just get here, they get in one spot. A lot of times they get in one house or they're like in one neighborhood, and the next thing you know, they're buying something. And they haven't been anywhere else. And then a couple months later, they go explore a different area and they're like, oh my goodness, I like it over here. You know what I mean? So it's, even though you've moved 6 times and you've moved into, you've lived in a couple different locations, that makes it really nice, because now you have something to compare the areas to. You can go to one, you can say, we definitely don't want to live in this kind of area. Like if you don't want to live in town, like if, for instance, Escazú, it's too much of a booming metropolis or something, and you'd rather be out somewhere where you can experience the beauty, the peace, the calm, the quiet of living kind of, it's not off-grid, but compared to Escazú, kind of off-grid for us. So that's really nice. So I'm glad that you guys took the opportunity to do that. And you were speaking of the house. Can you give us a little bit of a comparison? First of all, a little bit of a comparison maybe between the different places that you live and maybe the different areas, like maybe Guanacaste versus where you are now. But in the grand scheme of things, maybe compare that to what you experienced living in the U.S. Like how you can, what you think the cost of living. Are you saving here? And I know the prices have gone up here, so not as even as cheap here as it was before, but just a little bit of a comparison about pricing, because people are always concerned about the price.
Yeah, I think when we first came here, we're like, oh, we're gonna pay the same amount that we were paying back in the States. Well, a little less. So we were paying a little less. I think in Escazú we were paying like $700, and we're like, oh, this is a steal, because we were paying a lot more in New York City. So we were like content with that. But as we continued to like move around in Guanacaste, I think we were paying about the same price. We're like, oh, okay, so we're still saving. But then we started. I think it really is like, it's important to know like how you're going to be generating income. So like you can compare prices to like, okay, do you have a sustainable job? Or are you a freelancer? Like it really depends, because we came with a budget, a savings. We came with the idea of like, this is going to sustain us until we could get acclimated to what we're going to do here as freelancers. So that was the mindset when we first arrived. So we were okay paying a certain price. And now that we've been here for a while and like we kind of like went through that budget, we now have to find something a little bit more comfortable, that where we don't, because we're not working the same way we were working back in the States. So we can't have that same ideas of like, oh, this is what I'm going to pay and it's still cheaper than the States. It's like, no, now we have to kind of like live like the local.
And and connecting with the local was what opened our eyes. Like we would tell local like how much we were paying, and they would be like, what? You're paying that much for that old house? Yeah, that's insane. And like those conversations open up like, oh, my friend is renting, and then like word spreads out very quick. Where to like the second house we found it on our own, like someone told us, and then the third house, our neighbor told someone there's this nice family looking for a house, they have a child, and that third house is pretty affordable compared to the other two. It's like 300.
Yeah, because you can easily pay like a price of an expat as opposed to like a price of a local. And that's like, I feel like what a lot of people encounter when they come here is like, oh yeah, you know, they're going to see you and they're going to be like, okay, well, they're making money. They don't care how, but they're making it, you know, foreign money. So they're going to be able to afford whatever we say is the appropriate price for them. But then, you know, once you start talking around and be like, okay, well, it's not the same as it was before. Is there a way that we can, like, you know, come into a better agreement with like what's really happening in the local economy? And that's,
well, that brings me to another question, because I know you guys are native Spanish speakers. So how has that affected your lifestyle or your way of living in Costa Rica, that now that you speak Spanish, has it helped you a lot? Do you find that there's any drawbacks to it? Or tell us a little bit about that, because most of us don't come here as native Spanish speakers, and I've been here 7 years and I can barely do a sentence still. So
I mean, it does makes it a lot easier. There's a quicker connection between people. They feel like more connected to you because you speak the language. I mean, but in general, Costa Rica, in this side of the country, people are very welcoming. You know, so it's not like if you don't speak Spanish, people will reject you. They try to speak English. It's like progressive to speak English here, so they'll try. But definitely, like speaking Spanish has made it a lot easier, where there's no misunderstandings. Like we, of course, like Costa Rica and Dominican Republic, like the Spanish you speak is Dominican Republic Spanish. It's a little different, but it's not so far fetched. You know, so they have different linguals here and there, but for the most part, we understand each other pretty good. So.
Do they still treat you like an expat, or do you get a pass because you speak Spanish?
I think there is, because they're also familiar with Dominicans. I feel like a lot of ticos that we've come across, they're familiar with Dominican culture and
like
the music and all that. They feel like there's an admiration for our people. Appreciation. So they're like, oh yeah, you're from Dominican Republic, cool, like I love Dominicans and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, how can we work together? There is a camaraderie that happens of like, oh yeah, we can work something together. We're gonna look out for each other. There is a common understanding because of that.
And they like making like a connection, because I'll often say here like, oh, I have a friend that's Dominican. Like they'll say a lot every time I'll meet them. They're like, oh yeah, my friend is Dominican and I ate their food and blah blah blah. So it's an opening, I guess.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the baby situation, because that's when we met you. Tell us a little bit about the experience of having a baby in Costa Rica, and what were you planning? You know, you were pregnant and you said, I want to have the baby in Costa Rica, but did you have to research how that was going to work, or did you just say, I'm going to go to Costa Rica, have a baby? Or tell us a little bit about how that came about.
So I did do research. I'm not gonna say I came here blindlessly to have a baby and not know. The lady that I mentioned earlier, she was very well versed on like the laws and like what was allowed here in Costa Rica to have a child and what you needed. And one of the things that she said that really kind of like always stayed in my mind even before I got pregnant was like, she said, when you have a child here, it grants you a residency. And I'm like, when you have a child there, it's like, so when do I have a child? Do I go there first and I get pregnant? So I was like, at one point I was calculating all of that. But when I got pregnant, I'm like, this is real. What do I do now? Like, what do we do? So I had already some knowledge of like what it meant to have a child here. What are the regulations? What does it mean? Like, how can you have the child? And then I think when I was pregnant, the most important part for me was feeling safe in an environment. Just feeling grounded and at peace, because coming from New York City, coming from, just everything that was happening in the States with COVID just felt very heavy for me. And I needed to find a place where I felt like I would be able to have a child without no worries. And also not being so close to our parents. And I know that sounds horrible, but just because I know how much fear they had around all of everything when it comes to like welcoming a life. And, they've already gone through a lot of things of like raising children and then also raising children in a foreign place. And it's just like, I needed all of that to stop. And I needed just us to be able to figure out something that felt right for our family.
Right. Well, were you going to do, if you had been in the States, do you think you were going to do the same type of birthing there? or would you have just go to a hospital and have a baby? I mean, you know, had you already kind of decided how you wanted to go about birth?
So I'm part of a birth worker community. My sister is a traditional midwife. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the, you know, the processes of pregnancy and birth and all that. And I always knew, even before she got very invested in that world, and I joined her, I always knew that I could never have a child in the States. There's something about the energy there. And I always knew also that I had to have my child at home. Like that's always been true to me. Like I don't like hospitals in general.
Right.
So let alone be in a very vulnerable state and have all these people, strangers in a space where I'm just like already managing enough. So I always knew I had one way to do it. And I just had to find the right environment where I felt empowered to do it.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So, okay, so you had the baby here, and then because you have the baby here, are you like a permanent resident? Is that how it works? What kind of status do they give you when you have
all I'm aware of is the residency part. I have to, because there's so many different
it's
not very simple here. So all I know is the residency.
Okay, all right, that's okay. Okay, so now the baby is, how old is the baby?
A year and 7 months now.
A year and 7 months. So you probably maybe you aren't even really thinking about education or anything for her. Does she go to any play area? Like my kids are so old, I can't even remember what kids did when they were younger. But is there like a baby school activity area or something where mothers take their kids to, or are you going to homeschool her when she gets ready to go to school? Or have you been thinking about anything along those lines?
So the good thing is that Chanko is an artist and he's very hands-on. So he's constantly always with the baby and doing a lot of activities, even like the parkour and the like capoeira. Like he does the classes with the children on Saturdays. So that's kind of like what she does. And even all the children are older than her. They're like 5, 6, 7, but she's keeping up with the children. So she's in some type of interaction with the children. There is Montessori schools here. There's Waldorf school for the expat children. And I think we're still navigating what happens when she's 3 or 4.
Right.
But what I know in my heart is that I don't necessarily want to close my daughter into just the expat community, because it doesn't make sense why we would be in a foreign country and she would be with just like, English speaking children.
Right, you could be in New York.
Exactly for that.
And then also, I don't necessarily want to put her in public school because I still don't believe in the public school system in any country. Right. So I think we're just trying to see what happens in the world in the next few years. And
I mean, a lot of the teaching has already begun. Like they start beginning to learn so early on. My father's like, take her easy, so you're going too fast. But I don't know, like this little girl, she's very bright, and a lot of people have told us that. So it's not like just because we're the parents, they're like, wow, I've never seen a little girl do this and do that. So she learns a lot, but I also try to teach her a lot, like
she's like a little version of you though.
Right. So like when I'm doing anything, I like to take my time. And if she's watching, I'll like be careful how I'm doing it. So because she emulates things really fast. Right. She's like by age, like 6 months, she's grabbing the pencil and like already like scribbling everywhere. She sees me on my tablet, so she wants to grab the pencil on the tablet. She'll grab things and start mopping. She wants to do dishes, and I like for her to be involved as much as she can, so she can understand why like her hands are useful for different things. And on Saturdays, like Amira was mentioning, we have like the parkour class and things like that. We have a dance class that we also teach, like Latin dance, and she's already picking up on bachata and salsa and like doing this back and forth thing. And I'm like, when did she learn this? And I'm like, she was on the sideline watching us teach, and she's already doing it. So the teaching has begun, but ultimately we're still not sure what the result will be.
Well, I think just the experience of living in a foreign country, with a baby is already education. You know, when they, for everything that they see and experience, I think is very educational for them. So, you know, I think that's a good thing. And yeah, she is going to pick up on things. I don't really think you can really go too fast though, baby. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You just live your life. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then they pick up what they're going to pick up. And then if it's too fast for them, then they won't pick it up. You'll have to do them again later on. So I think that's a good thing. Let's talk a little bit now about the projects that each of you are doing here in Costa Rica that are close to your heart. And maybe we can start with you, Amira. Tell us about what you're doing, what you're involved in, what things are, you know, near and dear to you that you are doing here in Costa Rica. Share that with our audience.
Yeah. So I guess I should start by the classes that Chanko has mentioned, us teaching Latin dance. We started teaching Latin dance here in the community as an offering to the community because we're like, okay, we're here. Like, what do we do? So we started, like, we've been dancing all our lives. We dance professionally. We've taught before. So we started teaching merengue, bachata, and salsa. And it was mainly for like the tourists and the expats, but we're like, wait, a lot of ticos are very interested in dancing socially or even learning. Wow. So we're just trying to figure out how to market more to them. I mean, we're Spanish speakers. It takes a little bit more like, okay, getting the word out. But that's something that we're very passionate about together. And something else that we're doing together is our gateways. So, like about 5 years ago, Chanko and I started this feminine and masculine workshops, events in New York City. And we would do these 2 times a year where we would gather men and women, melanated men and women, and speak about how can we bring more harmony into our relationships, into our families, and then our communities. This was before all the podcasts were happening, before all this like men versus women was happening. And now I see the importance of having healing spaces for men and women. I think we've gotten very used to having healing spaces for just women, and now men are doing healing spaces for just men. But I don't think there's going to be ever a like a coming together or a common understanding unless we start healing together. So we created these gateways where we're wanting to bring a lot of people here in Costa Rica to just come together and really speak on like what's been happening. Why have our families been broken? Why our communities have been broken? And how can we honor each other and our roles? Our roles in our partnerships so that we can bring harmony and balance into our families. So we do that 2 times a year. I just opened it up for people that are looking for more like solo experiences or couple experiences, just to have so more like spiritual based, more disconnection from like their world, coming to this land because it's a super healing land. Chiripo, I think, is like the highest point of South America, Central America, the highest mountain point, and the waters are supposed to be super healing. So
what's it stand for, Chiripo?
Chiripo means eternal waters. So the river has its own just symbology, and I just want to invite people to experience this life that we live in, but for them to like really feel like, and not just like retreat, not just escape from their reality, but like take whatever they can learn here, take it back to their life and apply it to their life. So using my energy work, using my ability to analyze birth charts and guided meditations and the different activities that we do here to help them ground and find healing and harmony within themselves. To then go back home and take that.
And then your programs that you offer.
Yeah, and I also do virtual programs as well, healing virtual programs for one-on-one. We also started doing virtual couple programs as well for couples that are looking for that same thing, for bringing harmony and understanding into their relationship, using energy healing as a tool. So less of like talking what's happening and more of like, let's feel what our body has stored, because a lot of times is ancestral, is not ours, but we've just been carrying this pattern of like, this is the only way I know how to be in relationship, this is the only way I know how to see the other. So that's bringing like conflicts within our communities and stuff. So we've been doing couple guidance as we like to call it.
Wow. Yeah. So then you have the virtual healing, and then twice a year you're having on the ground, I guess we could call it, healings where people will come to Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the
Yeah,
way?
Yes.
What you
Yes, the masculine and the feminine gateways retreats. And then for anybody who's interested, when those group events are not happening, if they're interested in coming by themselves or coming with a small group of friends, we do customized gateways. So people that are just looking for deeper healing and deeper, just whatever may be speaking to their soul at that moment, we're customizing an experience for them.
Yeah,
so do you go to different areas in Costa Rica to have these? If you're customizing something, does the person pick out the location, or do they have to come to where you are in the mountains? Or
yeah, the customized ones, the ones for like the one-on-one and those couples and the groups, that's here. That's very focused on this land.
Right.
But for the group ones, that's in different parts.
Different parts, okay.
And then we also had this year or last year that we had a couple's 1 day retreat, and that one was for locally here, but also like for anyone was broadcasted online. It was through was it Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was like through Zoom, and it was a variety of activities within 1 day, and it was like a 1 day thing that people can just chime in on social media or Zoom.
Wow, that's wonderful. And so what are you doing, Chanko? What's your baby?
So my thing, last year I decided to not be so active on social media and decided to really focus on the local community here, so I focus a lot on building relationships by moving. So I teach capoeira, like I mentioned earlier, and parkour.
What is capoeira?
Capoeira is a Brazilian martial arts that developed in Brazil, but originally from Angola. So when the Africans were taken from Angola to Brazil, they carried their practices. And most people like to think it as a martial arts, but it's really a whole spiritual practice. It involves singing, instruments, dancing or playing, as they call it. They don't call it fighting. They call it playing. And it's become this whole thing that Brazil pushed out to the world, but the roots of it are in Africa. And so I started doing that for kids, and it became my thing. And I did it for a year. I was like, I want to be on the grounds. I want to be connecting with people and family, or bring your kids for an hour and a half. And then recently I just started doing parkour more to invite people outdoors. The capoeira was happening indoors, and the parkour, which is free running, jumping off objects, learning how to land safely, because these kids also are here. The river access, it's right there, so that sometimes they might go and climb on a rock and then get stuck or get hurt. So I'm pretty much giving them tools that they could use in their daily lives as they're exploring these things. And then about a year ago, in the rainy season, in the summer season, we started another group on Sundays. So we would go every Sunday, go up a river stream through rocks. And then one day I was like, oh, maybe we could do that as a group. And then we've been doing it now for almost 2 years. And it's been such a great relief for a lot of the men here. It's mostly men. And I like to say we try to do dangerous things carefully. So we would go, we'll assess each other. There's always one person leading, and the rest we're following, and we're making sure that no one gets stuck. We try not to touch the water as we're going up a stream. And then at the end, we find a pool of water, which we all jump in.
Wow.
And so it's become a whole thing that started as a fun activity, and now it's become our Sunday rituals.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. Anything else you're doing, or not that that's not a lot?
Yeah. So another thing that before I did the physical thing, when I arrived, I still had that fresh thing about art, right? So I started teaching art first to local children or expat children, right? And a friend helped us organize a group, and I started teaching drawing to the kids. But I quickly realized that I wanted to focus more on physical things like movement. And then this year now I'm picking up the art again and bringing it back to social media. I'm relaunching my YouTube channel, and I'm still doing the Sundays thing and Saturdays parkour, but more focusing now on the art. So I'm spending a lot more time at home. recording videos. It's just been the new challenge for me, remembering how to do these things. But yeah, I'm focusing on making art for mostly entertainment, also for clients. And now I'm launching my channel in Spanish, because back in the
Oh,
States, my channel was, most of my audience was English speakers. But as
right.
I come here now, it's like sourcing Costa Rica. So now most of my watchers are like from Mexico, Argentina, Peru, Costa Rica itself, and some
Interesting.
Dominican Republic, the United States. And I'm like gearing towards that audience, which I think needs also. There's a lot of English everything on the internet. There's not a lot of Spanish things on the internet.
Right. Right.
And I feel like I
Yeah.
can bring something new to that market.
Boy, you guys are busy. And,
And with a
and
child.
a
So.
baby too. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Well, tell us, each of you, tell us how our audience can get in touch with you if they're interested in any of your services or whatever. Give me your websites, YouTubes, Instagrams, whatever you have, and we'll make sure
Okay.
that we get it out to everyone. So for our radio audience, give me all the information, and then for the YouTube, when we put this on YouTube, I'll put it down in the description box. So go ahead.
Okay. That's good.
I'm writing.
So for me, Amira, yeah, you can find me on Instagram, amira.pg, P as in Peter. And then I also have a website, which is amirahtheenergyguide.com. Really long website. And and if you would like to email me, you can email me at amirapolanco3@gmail.com.
And spell that for us, Polanco.
Amira Polanco is POLAN as in Nancy CO3.com at gmail.com.
At Gmail.
3 as in the number, yeah.
Okay, and Chanko, for you?
So for me, you can find me on any social media at RTL Studios,
What is
ART,
Okay,
Art, CL
CL
Studios.
Studios.
Yeah, my Instagram, just a dot between RTL and Studios, but then all the other ones, you can just at
Altogether.
RTL Studios. And then my website is rtlstudios.com. There you can check out my merchandise, my art, and also if you want to put a commission, you can also feel free to reach me out for illustration, graphic design, portraits, animation, anything you can think of art related.
Wow, well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. In closing, can either of you or both of you maybe share some words of wisdom that you might want to leave with our audience? It could be about anything, life or whatever. Just some to impart some closing inspiration, or maybe something that you learned along the way, or something that you could just leave with our audience.
I'll start so that you can finish up. So for me, one thing that I've learned in this journey is like, you don't have to know the end destination to continue to start walking somewhere, like the river hops, or we call it river parkour, has taught me that we don't really even need to know the route that we're taking, because every time we go, we don't know what rock we're stepping on, but we know that we're going to find a pool at the end, and then we're going to jump into the water. And that's like a given in our minds, even though we don't know where we're going, how we're gonna get there, what obstacles we're gonna encounter along the way. Sometimes we can't go on the rocks, we have to go on the side, climb a tree, cross a bridge, and then ultimately we would walk into the water as if there's no rocks to go on. But we try not to touch the water. So as life gives us like these challenges, we don't know where we're ending up. Just know that you gotta continue going forward, and you'll reach a destination.
Wow, that's excellent. Amira?
Yeah, so for me, I would like to share that whenever you have an inkling, like whenever there's like this desire for something, don't ever second guess yourself. Don't, you have an internal compass, and we always know exactly what we need. It never steers us the wrong way. So like my inkling for coming to Costa Rica, it was literally like overnight, but I knew that that's what I had to do, and I knew that whatever I was going to encounter here was exactly what I needed. So always listen to yourself.
Well, great. those were great, guys. Thank you so much. And I do want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I think our audience will be very excited and interested in what you have to share. You guys have an awful lot to share. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Devin.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you guys soon.
Yes.
You too.